Welcome everyone. My name is Agustina. I work here at the Good Law Project and I am here with Caroline. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be doing a bit of a conversation about Caroline's book. Her Name is Alice, that is coming out tomorrow.
It is, yeah.
Very exciting. So we're going to do a bit of an introduction to start. Caroline. Give us 2 seconds. Perfect. We've got it. I'll say that again. Caroline is a writer, activist, and former psychiatrist. She's based in Surrey. And Caroline's daughter, Alice, died by suicide in May 2022 after waiting almost 3 years for her first appointment at a gender identity clinic. Since Alice's death, Caroline and her family have been tirelessly campaigning for better and adequate access to healthcare for trans people, and they were awarded a prize in 2024 for their campaigning work. Alice's story is written in Caroline's book. Just let me grab here. Her Name is Alice. It's up tomorrow. We'll be sharing a link on our socials, so you can go and buy it. But basically the book, and you call it this, Caroline, is a tribute to Alice, an invitation to learn about the realities of raising a trans teen, to discover the barriers that she faced trying to access healthcare, and hostility she endured while trying to do so. It is a story of your journey of acceptance of Alice's both transition, your struggle to help her through everything that she had to go through. And it invites us into the days, weeks, and months after Alice's death, but also beforehand, so we can understand more of the family and of Alice's journey. And it begs the question that lots of people, should be asking themselves, when those who are anti-trans say one trans child is one too many, what do they think of Alice's life? And do they not think that Alice's life mattered? So thank you very much for being here with us today. Just a couple of housekeeping. We are going to invite anyone listening and watching to ask any questions in our comments. So please feel free to put them in the comments and we'll try to reach them a bit later today. As a reminder, our comments are a safe space. So we will be enforcing that and keeping our comments a safe and an inclusive space. Another reminder that we will also have resources available in our comments if anybody needs them, and please access them if you want them. And yeah, should we get started?
Okay. So nervous.
No, don't worry. We're in a safe space. So our first question is, could you tell us a bit more about the book and what the book means to you?
Yeah, of course. I'm very proud of the book. Obviously, I'm sad that I ever had to write it, but here we are. So the book is my memoir about my daughter Alice, her life and her death. She was born in February 2002 as my third child. And we were told we were expecting a boy. Every parent wonders what sex their baby is going to be. We had the scans. We were told we were going to have a boy. And the midwife announced, yes, it was a boy. And she was given a boy's name and raised in that gender. But when she died 20 years later, she died as my daughter and will forever be remembered that way. But it wasn't so easy at first. I made mistakes and I hesitated in my acceptance of Alice as a trans woman. And it wasn't really, so the book is really, there's quite a lot of it about before she even came out, and it's about our family growing up and how she was as a young child. And then about how I was in the years when Alice was through puberty and experiencing quite a lot of anxiety. And there was a lot in the media, a lot of transphobia in the media. And I kind of absorbed a fair bit of that. And I talked about my reasonable concerns, at the dining table, and Alice was party to that. And I have huge regrets and such shame that she had to listen to that and wasn't in a safe space. I thought I would treat all my children with equal sort of respect and love. And I don't think I did do that for Alice, because when Kate, her older sister, came out as a lesbian, she was 13, because she grew up in a space where being same-sex attracted was, talked about with ease and grace in our household. And if only Alice had grown up in that sort of environment about trans people, then maybe she could have thrived a little bit more than she did. But in any case, we are where we are. So I go on to write about, I was trained as a psychiatrist, and you might think that psychiatry training would have helped me embrace my child's transition, but actually psychiatry has such a history of pathologizing difference. Actually, it drew me away from her. So I really had to learn to go on Alice's journey with her, so that I could look after her. That's what she needed. And I soon discovered that what she needed was care, compassion, understanding, tolerance, and all those things, that anybody wants. So a lot of the book is about that, and also about realizing that once you realize that she needed healthcare, medical transition, how inaccessible it was, and our battles and our fights to get her seen, and the trauma of being turned down and gatekept at every opportunity, and the actual harm that was inflicted upon her, really, by people charged with her care, the abuse, the dead naming. So it's about trying to educate people who probably don't realise how difficult it is and how bad it is about what we faced, But I got there in the end with her, and we did our best. And I just want to change people's minds, A lot of the book is about, what I've already said about the transphobia that we see in the media. And Alice would have been able to see that, and she would have seen what the anti-trans activists were saying about people like her. And it's got to affect your mental health. It affects my mental health. And, we need to change minds. So I went on my journey with Alice to change my mind. And I've written the book because I think everybody else needs to come on that journey with me and change their minds so that children like Alice can live without shame and live a peaceful life. So, like I said at the introduction, I wish with all my heart I hadn't had to write it, and I would rather be anywhere else but here. But I will use what's happened to Alice to try and speak up for the trans community. Yeah,
that's amazing. Thank you very much. And I think it's really interesting because you talk about a journey and both that you and Alice went through, and the way that you've written it in the book, you've written all of Alice's journey as Alice. So from the moment she was born to the moment that she died, she is Alice. She's referred to as Alice. Could you speak to us a bit more about why you made that decision?
Oh, of course, that's a really easy question to answer because that's what Alice would have wanted. It wasn't easy at first. We made a lot of mistakes with her name, and we dead named her and we misgendered her, and we always apologised. But it soon became second nature to just refer to her always as Alice. So whether she was a baby at my breast, or her first day at school, or making pasta, all things before she transitioned, we just call her Alice, and it's so simple. And that's what, when you talk to parents of other trans children, that's what they do. That's on the whole, that's my experience. To kind of suggest that I wouldn't, especially now that she's dead, would just be so disrespectful, as if I might turn back and say, well, I don't have to worry about her now and I can just choose to use her old name. And I would just never do that. I just think that's really disrespectful. And Alice is her name. Her name is her name.
No, but I think it's such an important thing to bring up, especially when we are seeing worldwide, rollbacks on people being able to choose their own pronouns, this very clear message, she chose who she was.
Yeah.
And that's who she was from the start.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how we're going to remember her.
Exactly.
I think it's a really clear, really strong message.
Yeah.
Just to follow us through on kind of like what you talk about in the book, there's an inquest after Alice's death. And the inquest found that Alice was let down by the gender affirming health services that we all know are, underfunded and insufficiently resourced, not only in the UK, but in most places in the world. And we've only seen these services get worse, which is not what we'd like to be saying. But could you, from your experience, speak about why this, prompt free in lots of cases? Because that is something that we don't talk about that much. Because, people talk about, you can go private, but lots of people don't have the resources to do that. So how this free, prompt, adequate access to healthcare is so important for trans people.
Well, healthcare is healthcare, and you expect it for whatever you need treatment for, and being trans is no different. So it depends a bit, where you are in your journey, but for a young trans person who's maybe got puberty approaching, it's a ticking time bomb, and you need to get access to care early in order to prevent the irreversible changes. And we saw that with Alice, because she wasn't able to come out to us until she was 17, and so she'd already experienced quite a lot of the changes of puberty. And part of what I was referring to before my introduction was I wish that I had spoken more positively, because then she might have come out to me earlier and we could have got her access to care earlier. And I just saw the damage it did to her puberty. And not everybody who's trans has gender dysphoria, but Alice had massive dysphoria, and she just hated the changes in her body, and it really impacted on her mental health, and I just saw it as she changed. And so I would just love to have been able to come out a bit earlier because of the climate and around trans people, but B, get access to proper care. And we probably shouldn't call them puberty blockers if Alice was going to receive them, the GnRH analogues, because Alice had already entered puberty, but changes it in a child's body can carry on until they're kind of 25. So we saw a lot of changes happening with Alice that could have been prevented with adequate treatment. So it's vital for young people to get seen. And obviously we know now that puberty blockers are banned. So, it's just heartbreaking that these children aren't going to be given the opportunity to just pause puberty, give them a chance to stop and think. And it's not, we read in the papers all the time about this rushed care, and it's just not true. Alice was, if she were alive today, she'd been waiting 5.5 years for her first appointment. And so how anyone could call that rushed, I just don't know. So you just want to be treated with respect like anybody else. You just want to get seen in a timely manner. But trans healthcare has been taken out of the 18-month outpatient waiting list kind of rule because it's not a consultant-led service. But since the Cass report has recommended that children only get treatment after consultation with a national multidisciplinary team meeting, I don't understand how that works. So it just seems very unfair and cruel. So it needs to be free because people can't afford it. I mean, we were able to pay for Alice's private medical health care because we'd sold our house and we downsized, but not everybody has that opportunity. And also, if you want to be very blunt about the figures, I think the Samaritans released some figures about suicide a few years ago, that every suicide loses the economy about £1.5 million. And, Alice is never going to be a taxpayer. Peter and I haven't paid any tax since she died because, haven't been able to work. And that alone would have paid for the cost of Alice's healthcare. So it's cost effective to look after your citizens, and trans people deserve care just as much as anybody else. And the wait is a torture chamber, I think, and it's no wonder people's mental health suffers. And it's amazing that so many trans people are thriving despite the barriers to care that are in front of them.
Yeah, and you make a really good point in the book when you're like, when Alice has an ear infection, she gets seen within days.
This makes me feel quite emotional, really, because it wasn't long before she died that this happened, and she had an ear infection. And she did her e-consult. She didn't have an ear infection. She had earache, and she did her e-consult, and she was seen within 2 days at the doctor's surgery. But the month previously, in April, she had sent an e-consult to say that she didn't think her hormones were right, and she was feeling hopeless and helpless and worthless, and that life wasn't worth living. And they sent her appointment for July, and she died in May. Sorry, so it's really hard for me to think, what message did that send my child about how much her transness, if you want to call it that, mattered to people, and it wasn't. I mean, that was on top of the longer wait for the NHS clinic. So it's just a tragedy, and I can only imagine how that played out in her mind. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. And I think just to move us along, you've mentioned this a handful of times, but the role that the media has to play when we're talking about trans rights and the rhetoric that we have with trans rights. And you have a great quote in the book when you say, you know, there's 20,000 people protesting at trans rights, and we see trans rights happen every year in London and in lots of places in the UK, and not be covered with the, you know, the amount of media that it deserves. And, you know, you say met with virtual silence, well, a single tweet from people like J.K. Rowling can, you know, go around for months and reach millions. And we've talked about how, you know, the effect that has, not only on the way we speak about the trans community and trans people, but the effect that has on trans people themselves. Do you have, you know, any advice or any learnings on not only how to deal with it, but what you've seen happen with that?
Oh, I wish I did. You know, we're just up against this the media giants who can just say whatever they like about trans people, and to see so many lies spread about them in the press is just heartbreaking. And I really don't have the answers. I mean, I'm in the position where Alice has died, and that's given me the freedom to speak out. So many parents of trans children don't feel able to because they want to protect their children, and that's completely understandable. But why should it be? I mean, I feel quite angry that it's my job to talk about what's happening to trans people. I want trans people to be sitting here talking for themselves, but they don't want to because they get bullied and sort of cross-examined as if they're kind of, you know, criminals. So I will use the opportunity of my ability to write a readable book that might access, you know, people might be able to access to speak out. But it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that people are only going to start listening because a bereaved mother is able to talk about it. But I really don't have the answers. We just have to keep talking. We just have to keep speaking every time we hear transphobia at a dinner party or at work, you know, in the kitchen or whatever. We just have to be brave and speak up, and just hopefully just people start to listen. I haven't got any answers. I mean, I try engaging on social media. I'd given up. I was on Twitter and I'd come off it, but I did try to engage with gender critical people on their turfs, whatever you want to call them. And, you know, I just got so much abuse. And I was at the Judith Butler event at the Royal Festival Hall on Sunday. And if the great Judith Butler can't pacify a turf, then nothing I'm going to say is going to change their mind. So don't waste your time trying to talk to them.
And it's really interesting that you talk about information and advice. And again, there's a really great example in the book of your friend Jane, who, you know, starts off as one of your closest friends from when the kids are really young, and then it gets a bit complicated. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
It got very complicated. Jane was Alice's godmother. And, you know, we were so close. We'd known each other since my eldest child was born. And, you know, I just loved her with all my heart. And then it became really apparent that she was very anti-trans. You know, we were talking. Alice had just come out, so I was feeling very vulnerable. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what this was going to look like. Jane has her own history of child trauma, and she was in a position where she really didn't trust men, and she just held on to the myth that's perpetuated in the press that trans women were really just men playing dress-up predatory men, and that was what she believed. And it was very difficult between us for a very long time. You know, everything, quite a few standoffs, and it was quite cool between us. But there was some gentle persistence. And also, I mean, really all credit to Jane. She self-examined. She's a really smart woman, and she did it for me, and she did it for Alice. And she went away and she read, and she watched YouTube videos. She watched ContraPoint's Abigail Thorne. And I didn't expect her to change, and she didn't too either. She admits it. I think I talk about it in the book. And she was kind of a bit cross with herself. But she changed her mind, yeah. And it's amazing, and I'm so grateful that she did, and she's been such a tremendous support. And people can change their minds. You know, I changed my mind. I didn't think I wasn't as far down the road as Jane, but I could have been. And I'm very grateful that I had Alice, and who brought me into the light, so to speak.
I think the book has those moments that are really enlightening, like your mother, like Jane, and those moments, people can get informed and people can change their mind.
My mother was just wonderful. She was wonderful. She's like, oh, sweetheart, don't worry. There have been people like Alice since God was a boy, she said.
And she's right.
And it was just wonderful. She's 98 now. And and it's amazing. So don't think that you can't talk to older people about these things.
Yeah. 100%. Again, just like picking up on one of the threads on the book, there's this thread, surrounding the lack of transparency around information about trans people, both from the media, but also from the government. And we learn almost at the end of the book that Alice's data wasn't included in Professor Appleby's report. And, the report that was supposed to have, all the information and defend kind of like what the government was saying about puberty blockers and about access to healthcare for trans people. And, we also talked about how it's extremely difficult to engage with politicians when talking about trans rights and with the media. So could you tell us a bit more about your experience with that side of things as well?
Yeah, well, this all goes back to when Jolyon was the whistleblowers were speaking about the increase in suicides after the Kira Bell ruling, and quickly the government wanted to quash that down, didn't they? So they commissioned the report by Professor Appleby, which included the dates and the parameters that would have included Alice's death. So I set about with freedom of information requests and so forth to find out about whether Alice's data was included, and it took me months and months and months, and finally it was almost quite by luck really that I found out by asking just the right person in a I don't know, the computer department at the Tavistock, I don't know. Anyway, they just got back to me and went no, and I was just gutted. It just floored me because this meant that the report was inaccurate, it was flawed, and yet West Streeting was still using it on the floor of the Houses of Parliament to dispute that there was any increased risk of withdrawing healthcare to trans people. And I think he said on that day, something about trans activists. I can't remember what he called them. It'll come to me in a second. We had a very bad week that week in December, like the 8th of December. Appleby tweeted something to say that, one of his sort of goals for 2025 was to raise doubts about the validity of the things that trans activists said. I don't think he said trans activists, I think he said activists. But we kind of knew where he was coming from. Then West Streeting in Parliament said that we were online actors. And then a few days later, Cass said that trans activists were shroud wavers. And that's a particularly derogatory term used in the NHS to call out people who are criticising the NHS for failings that might lead to death, for example. And it's just like, well, my daughter did die, so I will talk about it and I will wave my shroud. And it's just infuriating to me that these three viewpoints are getting, broadcast in mainstream media. I mean, Cass's interviews in the Times and West Streeting was speaking to the nation. And then I have information about Alice, which contradicts quite a lot of what they're saying, and yet nobody is listening to it. So this is why I've written the book. So some people might begin to learn the other side of the story.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Just got a couple more questions, if that's okay with you, before we open the floor for our public's questions. But one of the other things that, we talked about is your book is you call it a call to arms. And I really, really like that, because I think that's what we need right now. We need to rally behind the trans community and as allies, stand with them and for them. And I think that's exactly what your book does. But for people that might be watching and might not, know where to start, might be really willing to do so, but are, lost on what the first step they could take is, what can we do? How can people join the fight?
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? I mean, you need to get educated first, you need to, because I thought I was a trans ally, when I talk about these times when I was talking at the dinner table about concerns, reasonable concerns, I still thought I was a trans ally. So you have to realise that perhaps you're not the transphobe that you thought you were and get better education. I mean, I subscribe now to LGBTQ media, so you need to do a Google search and find some media that you can consume so that you know all the facts. So you're not relying on mainstream media, not relying on Radio 4 or BBC. So that's the first thing to do. And then when you know what you're talking about, you need to speak up when you hear, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, when you hear it, you need to be braver and you need to make yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable in order to support trans people, because they have to feel uncomfortable all the time. I mean, obviously I'm not trans, so I can't speak for trans people, but I know what Alice was like, and I feel uncomfortable hearing all the horrible things that are said about trans people, so of course they're feeling terrible. So you just need to be braver. You have to be careful, I think, because in my interactions with Jane, I could see when I was really going too far, and when we both could. It was a dance we kind of played with each other. But if you see people glazing over and you just lost them, you just have to draw. You just have to leave it. But you don't give up. You just keep going back. But don't waste your energy fighting with people who aren't going to change, because it just makes you sick and it's not good for you. So you do have to pick your battles. But yeah, just be braver, and pay attention and listen to trans people. And and if you don't know any trans people, go out and find some, because it's otherwise I think Judith Butler calls it like a phantasm, where it's just kind of this made up monster under the bridge that's going to come and gobble up our children, and it's just not true. And it's heartbreaking.
Exactly. And I think there's some great examples of different types of activism in the book. You and your family go to Trans Pride, which is an option and happened. Your mother's gift to Alice to buy new clothes is a form of joining and fighting on activism. What Kate does with leading, barristers for the inquest. I think what's really good about it is that for lots of people, they might think about campaigning or activism and they might be like, oh, that's not for me, that's a bit far.
Make a placard and go on a march.
But it's such a good example. It can be conversations, it can be a placard and a march, it can be donations, it can come from so many different aspects.
We were talking earlier about politics, and it's like you can write to your MP. I think there are MPs out there who are trans allies, but I think it's a bit of a poison chalice for them, and they're a bit reluctant to speak out more publicly about it. And I think they respond to contact from their constituents, and everyone write a letter to your MP, and they have to respond. So sometimes they don't, as I found out. When Alice was still alive, I wrote to my MP several times, and I never got a reply, so they're not all very good. But
have they replied now?
I'm in a different constituency.
Yeah. Just, that was me being nosy.
He's resigned and retired. So.
Would it be okay if we look at a couple?
Of course.
I'm just going to have a look at the ones we have. So we have one from Leah. Who says, I'm a trans woman and my mum is, grieving for my former self and doesn't get how I can be the same person but different. Did you ever have that feeling of grief, and what would you advise my mum?
Oh, that's such a good question. Hi, Leah. I didn't really. I write about it in the book. I really just wanted my happy child back. So as long as Alice was going to be happy, I didn't care that she was a girl. And because you won't be aware of this, but my father died when I was 4. So when other parents of trans children, trans youth, talked about their feelings of grief and bereavement, I used to feel quite prickly about it and think, come on, pull yourselves together. Your child hasn't died. They're just the same child. They're just living a slightly different path. So that was the way approached it. So although in some of the headlines you might have read, if you read the Times on Sunday, were saying about my years of failing to sort of accept Alice, it's really kind of not true and was quite sort of over-egged. I did support her transition quite quickly. And I'm sorry that, your mum, I think we have to allow parents to feel like that a little bit. I did struggle, but I just didn't use the words sort of grief and bereavement. So, get your mum to message me. Yeah, go on my website and I've got a contact form, and she can send me an email and I'll talk to her.
Oh, Mick, that's really kind. Thank you. We'll share your socials and your website on the comments as well, so we can make sure that Leah's mum can reach you.
Yeah, I'm sure she loves you. She's just worried about you, because that's what I was coming from. I was just like really worried because you saw what was happening to the trans community and the lack of care, and I worried. And obviously Alice died, so kind of my worries came true. But it's not the outcome for most trans people. Most trans people are going to live full happy lives. That's the goal.
Amazing. We've got another question from Natasha, who says, as someone, and it's interesting because it's something that we were talking about with politicians, but as someone who will be meeting soon with Scottish ministers to talk about transgender healthcare, what message, or is there any message that you wish for them to understand, or that you
well, I just really want them to understand that as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of medics are concerned, that CAS is wrong, and it goes against so much international evidence of the evidence base for trans healthcare. The New England Journal of Medicine recently came out and said, that it was, I can't remember the quotes, but they just completely rubbished the report, really. And there's more and more countries are coming out and saying, we're not going to operate in the way CAS is, that we're going to do it this other way. And that's the most important thing. But I think politicians just think, well, but CAS has been validated by this person or that person, or and Wes Streeting has validated it, so it must be true. But it's not. You need to educate yourself. You need to read about CAS, and it's really, I think it was Jolyon who phrased this first, that it's policy-based medicine rather than medicine-based policy. Is that the right way around? That the policy, the gender-critical ideology has infiltrated Westminster, and it's infiltrated the NHS in parts, NHS England, and it's creating treatment pathways based on what non-medics want. And it's just a complete dereliction of medical care and duty. And, doctors they say the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, and withdrawing trans healthcare is causing untold harms, not just the sort of harm that Alice experienced, but just terrible problems with mental health because of not being taken seriously, not being able to get the care they need. So that would be my main thing, is that you have to understand that CAS is a bit of a setup, in my opinion, and believe that, and not just think I'm some kind of conspiracy theorist because I say that, because I've seen the evidence.
And I think you mention it in the book as well when you talk about having talked to medical students, and most of them haven't had any or almost no access to trans healthcare and how to deliver trans care adequately, or what it means.
No, that's
for more than a couple hours.
That's right, yeah.
So I guess that's something that would also be, if you have me.
Yeah, I think so. And I think GPs keep saying that they don't have enough knowledge base, to treat this very specialist population, but it's not a specialist population really. It's about the same population that has diabetes, and GPs manage a lot of diabetes. And Dr. Barrett, who's like one of the chief clinicians at the Tavistock Clinic, who spoke at Alice's inquest, said that he could teach GPs to manage trans healthcare in an evening session. So why GPs are being told by their governing body that they shouldn't touch trans patients with a barge pole, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. in my mind, it must be ideologically driven from somewhere. And also we need to remember that the BMA, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, what was the third organisation, all spoke up and said that the beauty blocker ban shouldn't go ahead. But Wes Streeting went ahead and did it anyway because he listened to Sex Matters and the LGBT Alliance and other anti-trans actors. So it's an ideologically driven health policy. It's not caring for trans patients at all. It hasn't got their best interests at heart at all. It's devastating.
That is, I think, super clear. Let me find you another one. So there is one from Katrin, I'm hoping I'm not butchering your name, I'm really sorry. Do you see any grounds for optimism when it comes to public acceptance of trans people?
Oh, Katrin, that's a good question. I think maybe I'm not the best person to ask about optimism. I'm just, I'm very sad a lot of the time. I hope so. It just has to turn around, doesn't it? If we lose optimism, then what have we got left? So, let's try and be optimistic. But in the current climate, especially what's happening in the United States, it's really difficult to maintain, isn't it? So I think you have to find your tribe. So if you are a trans person, this is something that Alice struggled to do, and I really regret that I wasn't able to facilitate her to find more, because she moved to Brighton and I thought, she'll find it herself, but she didn't. And so, find your tribe and stay safe and, build each other up. I think that's really, really important. I hope, I do have to have some optimism. I hope that my book might land on a few desks of people that make decisions, and they might read it and might change things. Let's try to be optimistic, but it's really hard, isn't it? It's really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hard moment to remain optimistic, but I think. And
there are good people.
Exactly.
There are good people who want to help. There's some amazing doctors who want to help. I've had people reach out to me, and people that I was at medical school with who are really, really working hard on the front line to try and get their patients the care they need. But their hands are tied by literal laws that our ministers are making that don't make any sense. And they, the puberty blockade ban was brought in because of an emergency order, which are used if there's terribly high risk, of like imminent death or something like that, and it just makes no sense. Intersex children and cis children with other conditions are still prescribed them. So how dangerous are these drugs? They're not dangerous. They're just dangerous for trans children. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Thank you. And I was going to say, I think, and again, I know I've mentioned this, but I just found it so inspiring. It's like, you're reading the book and you go, okay, Carola's going to go talk to her mom, and Peter's going to go talk to her mom, and as a reader, you have an idea of what you expect that to go, and then you read it and you're like,
yeah. I had that feeling as a daughter. I had no idea what was going to happen.
And I think there are those moments of positivity that they are in the book, they are in life. It's just and we have to hold on to them.
Yeah, they're wonderful. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
We've got another question from Tadeo, and it's about something that you've mentioned already, and we talked about it in what we talked about. We also talked about it with Leah's question before. But do you have a piece of advice that you'd give parents of trans children and teenagers?
Yeah, I would. I think maybe you're going to be quite frightened and quite anxious, but you have to try and put your fears and anxieties and concerns on the back burner, and you have to listen to what your children are saying. Try and prioritize them, and imagine if you're feeling all this kind of anxiety, imagine what they might be feeling like, and try to center them. And as I said earlier about becoming an ally or an activist is that's my cheat notes. Just do some research. Just start contacting people. You have to be super careful though, because you can go online and you can put in Google things into Google, and you'll come up with Bayswater Support Group, for example, which looks like a really fluffy, friendly support group for parents of trans children, and it's not, please don't go on there. But you can get duped, you can get drawn in.
100%.
So just listen. Listen to your child and imagine what it must be like for them. It's incredibly brave to come out as trans in the current climate. So they're not just doing it for lols, it's real. Yeah.
I love that. Amazing. I think we are a bit out of time for questions. We might have time for one last one, if that's okay with you. And it's from Amrita, which says, what do you think are the most impactful things we can do to help? And I know, again, we talked about
the most
impactful things we can do to help. There are so many challenges, and we only have limited energy. So it'd be good to hear what you think we could do to help.
Oh, crikey, I don't know. Is that as an ally? Is it?
I think it's an ally. Yeah.
I think. Oh gosh, I don't know. Just keep speaking up. Just keep speaking up. Just keep challenging.
I think that's such a simple, that's what we call it in the campaign, a call to action. It doesn't have to be a massive thing. It can be, and I think you've mentioned this a lot, being brave.
Yeah, I have another thing. Check in on trans people that you know, because I see that on social media all the time, that trans people kind of feel quite forgotten, and like that we don't realise, as cis allies, we don't realise how bloody awful it is for them at the moment. And so just check in on them more and just ask them how they are, and ask them if they need anything, and look after the literal physical trans people that you know in your life.
Amazing. I think just as a bit of like closing remarks, what you said on like, again, being brave, standing for and with trans communities, speaking out and being brave is, with Amrita, it's already a massive thing to do, and it's already a massive step, and it's already massively helpful. Anything else that you'd like?
No, I'm shaking. I'm not feeling very brave. My adrenaline's run out.
We'll wrap it up. But that wraps up kind of our live stream for today. Thank you so much, Caroline. We're so appreciative for you coming today. And to everyone watching and listening, thank you for your questions and your time. We talked about this throughout, the 45 minutes that we've been here, but with transphobia on the rise in the world and everything that's happening, standing with trans people and showing the world the strength of our movement and our support is more important now than ever. And I'm going to repeat it again because I think it's such a good thing. Just be brave, stand with trans community, stand with what's right, and being brave is the most important thing we can do right now. And Caroline's book, exactly, I was going to go into the formal side of it. Caroline's book is out tomorrow. It's available for pre-order anywhere that books are sold. We'll have links in our socials if you want to go purchase it through those.
It's a great book for allies rather than the trans community. I know a lot of people in the trans community said they're going to read it, which is wonderful, but it's really about changing hearts and minds. So if you've got someone in your life who you think could do with a few life lessons about trans people, then it's a perfect book for them. Yeah, I am very proud of it. It's I probably say that I write better than I talk. So if you think I've been a bit waffly and verbose, it's a lot more pithy and engaging, maybe.
Well, I think you've been very engaging, and I think the book is great. So yeah, before you leave, we're going to have you sign our copy as well as our office copy. But yeah, I think just to close up, as your book says, the book's a call to arms. That's what we need to do. And thank you so much for everyone that's been listening and watching. And
thank you.
That's all from us. Thank you very much.